Hello, welcome everybody to Converses. Today we have with us Vivó, a Sumerian historian specialist, and Júlia Puigdomènech, an IR scholar who just wrote a book about the Sumerian history. Their book is that about in order to establish what constitutes in the basis of what we recognize as international relations and its system, it is imperative to look back in the time and assess the different types of societies that took place long before the Westphalian model officially dictated the beginning of the international systems as we know them today. And even though the 1648 treaty was a turning point in the history of IR, it did not mark the beginning of international relations. It was with the first instances with diplomacy that the policies began to significantly interact with one another, and the level of international capacity increased to another level. And I thank them so much for being here. And now we proceed to asking them some questions. So first of all, I want to make sure that all of our listeners are on the same page. So many of them might not know what Sumeria or Uruk is, so would you mind explaining on that?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Maria, for having us today here. Well, Sumeria, which nowadays is in the south of Iraq and Kuwait, was laid between the Euphrates and Tigris River in what the Greeks later called Mesopotamia. It is well accepted that the first cities in history rose in summer. They were Eridu, Ur, Larsa, Isin, Adab, Kula, Lagash, Nippur, and Kish, and that were amongst the most important ones. However, Uruk is considered to be the truly first one, the largest and the most powerful in the time. In fact, Claudio Coffi-Revilla stated that Uruk was not only the first state-level society, but also the first empire and the first international political system.
Okay, thank you so much. So were these places isolated, or if were there the main drivers that made these polities that could have been isolated different from the others? How could you relate that to IR, and was it because the level of interactions that they had, and what led you to think that there were such interactions?
Okay, thank you very much for your interesting questions, and thank you again for having us here. So, first of all, we believe it is important to know that the Sumerian city-states had lots of clay and counted with a great advantage, which is their proximity to the Euphrates and Tigris River, that enabled them to use water as a mode of transportation, as they were easily navigable. However, they lacked stones, precious materials, and woods, which is why they needed to trade. In fact, objects that are typically from Uruk have been found as far as the Mediterranean and Pakistan. Moreover, given the amount of resources and the difficulties of moving such a great army for such long distances, it is most likely that Uruk obtained goods through diplomacy and trade rather than by wars and conquests. And thanks to these factors and some innovations, a series of social technologies like money, organization taxation, mass production of goods, or large-scale public art emerged, which obviously entails a certain social complexity.
Okay, that was very interesting. Thank you so much for that answer. Why did you give so much relevance to the Sumerian city-states, and why did you take Uruk especially as a case study?
Well, we took Uruk as a case study because the city of Uruk traded with the societies situated in the Zagros Mountains in Susa in Egypt and in northern Lebanon, and this trade with foreign lands was the main motivator in the development of writing forms. Although the Sumerians were the first and oldest civilization to invent scripture through pictograms, it wasn't until trade emerged that means for accurate long distance communication between the merchants of Sumer and their agents abroad existed. And this consequently led to the emergence of the cuneiform writing.
Okay, thank you. And why is so much importance given to writing, and what does it have to do with IR and especially the diplomacy? Why did you take that as the starting point?
Also, the appearance of writing and the emergence of the lingua franca allowed record keeping and helped polities to integrate cultural, economic, and political system. Hence, it enabled diplomatic relations to take place more easily without the need of a traductor. So, with the spread of writing, Akkadian was developed, and is considered one of the first lingua franca since it was used in localities where it was not the dominant spoken language. For example, there were written tablets in Akkadian discovered in Mari, an hegemonic state strongly influenced by Sumerians in culture and religion, which established one of their cities as trade center. It was located in a strategic point, in a strategic position in the Euphrates trade routes between Sumer, the Eblaite kingdom, and West Lebanon. The tablets give information about the kingdom, including economic, administrative, and judicial texts. To the nature of diplomatic relations between the political institutions in the area, and also revealed the extensive trading networks in the 18th century before Christ that had connected long distances areas like Crete in the Mediterranean and Afghanistan in Southern Asia.
Yes, in fact, archaeologists found the earliest diplomatic archives that date in 1500 before Christ, and these notes incorporate references to the relations among city-states, treaties to ensure peace, discretions, and statutes of agents. These first strategic notes were composed on clay tablets in cuneiform writing, and the appointed messenger would read the contents of the tablets and later give an extra oral clarification. And in fact, the Sumerian king list, a cuneiform document around 2100 before Common Era, is a perfect example of a document that recorded different kings' wills. The list is split into a few different segments and accounts for a great flood similar to the biblical deluge. It listed the accomplished of every king of the region in order to show continuity in the ruling order since the beginning of civilization. And Noah Samuel Kramer, you may know him, in one of his books stated that the first ruler of Sumer whose deeds are recorded, if only in the briefest kind of a statement, is a king by the name of Etana of Kish, who may have come to the throne quite early in the third millennium before Christ. In the king list, he is described as who established all the lands.
So if you don't mind me asking, why didn't so much interaction capacity and so much closeness between polities lead to conflicts? And if so, how does war contribute to interactions between polities and diplomacy?
Well, during 3000 Common Era, there were 20 cities in Sumeria that kind of proximity often led to conflicts. And although these states shared cultural beliefs, they were also really competitive. The development of diplomacy was not only pushed by trade, but war also contributed to its emergence and development. And Sumerian cities were experiencing a population growth, therefore they started to expand. There were swamps that separated the cities and they started to disappear. This created conflict between opposed cities due to lack of availability of water and the disputes of lands. So these conflicts started to escalate into wars, and as a consequence, they ended up capturing and making slaves Sumerian population of other cities. Moreover, the competition for supreme power between the states triggered these conflicts, and the sophistication of warfare pushed further the development of diplomacy. In fact, one of the oldest diplomatic documents and the earliest documented interstate relationship known inside Babylonia was written on a clay nail by King Entemena, the king of Lagash, in 1400 before Christ, and in fact it refers to a treaty with the king of Uruk, which outlines the political bound between both cities.
That was very enlightening, thank you. So what exactly is your approach to answer how did international systems begin? Because from what we have seen in your book, your opinion does not coincide with the traditional or mainstream narrative, right? Why would you say that is?
Well, our approach to the question, when did the international system emerge, intends to challenge the Eurocentrism of the Westphalian model and tries to go beyond this 1648 agreement to offer a more wide understanding of international systems and to acknowledge the interdependence among regional systems like the Sumerian city-states. And as Kayagolu stated, contemporary international relations remain caught in the notion that the West sets the standard for civilized conduct. Western liberal democracies are constantly treated as the only capable entity of bringing any sort of order to the system. And it's precisely this ethnocentrism is the most evident in the international system scholars' acceptance of the Westphalian narrative to explain the origins and development of international society. Therefore, we must analyze older international systems through the present dynamics by understanding their futures and portray them independently. I believe Dr. T and Zagros said it very well when they wrote that political scientists view an international system as a network of interacting polities with strategic actors, either domestic or foreign, making interdependent decisions. Using a modern political science framework to evaluate and interpret archaeological and epigraphic evidence can produce a somewhat different picture than what, say, an anthropologist or a historian would see. Although some of the features of the emerging models may coincide, other important and insightful details do not, especially on the origins and formative stages of the international system.
What Julia is saying is exactly right. We have taken the Sumerian city-states as a case study, but one must bear in mind that even though they are considered to be the first full-fledged international systems, many other came across before the Westphalian model, like the Greek city-states that usually organize themselves in leagues, or the Mayan city-states and many others.
All right, just so to be clear, we have already established why you chose the Sumerian city-states as the starting point of international systems, but why the focus on diplomacy exactly?
As we have previously established, the Sumerian city-states were interdependent polities that had a huge amount of interaction with neighboring and faraway city-states or kingdoms, mostly through trade, but also through war and conflicts. And all these interactions are what we know as diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I completely agree. Diplomacy is the beginning of international relations due to the requirement for polities to have a certain level of sophistication, mainly impulsed by the ability of record keeping to interact in a formal and institutional way with other units. Therefore, we believe that Sumeria clearly showed these characteristics to prove that it was indeed the first fully fledged international system.
All right, thank you very much. That was very enlightening, very interesting, and very understanding. Thank you so much for being here despite these conditions and for writing such an enlightening book. And I hope to read more from you guys. Thank you so much.